Hi guys, my name is Girish, the host for Back2Basics, another Back2Basics, another week, season 2 obviously. We are going to be talking to a keynote speaker, an amazing person. I just spoke with him just a few minutes ago, but I think I've seen his work. It seems like I've known him for years or months. So let's bring Krister into this call and we'll talk about how to play with words when you talk to someone and how to play with words in general. So let's talk to Krister. Krister, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
I'm glad to be here.
So before we
my teenage daughter would be like, "Hey, my dad is so basic."
Okay, thank you so much.
Totally, she would actually not say that, but
she might say that and maybe not admit to it.
yeah, that's true. Hopefully not to my face.
Yeah. So before we get into the basics of what we're going to talk about today, what does Back to Basic mean to you?
I think Back to Basics is, at least in the context of like what I do and what I kind of think about on a daily basis, is about language and communication. And I know that when we're whether it's in a work setting or a personal setting, we often think that, if we have a frustrating person in our lives, whether it's a boss or a spouse or a parent or a child, we often think that they need to change. We need to change them. And my back to basics philosophy is that we actually don't need to change people. We just need to change our words and people will follow.
Wow. Thank you so much, Krister, for that. I don't know where I saw you. I saw you somewhere on the website. And your name popped up somewhere, one of the articles that I read. I don't know which article was it. And when I read your website and I said, wow, this is the person that I need to get him on my show. Because it's very important to teach people communication and play with words, as you say. So I think there's a phase that you always mention on your website called talk shift. Can you explain what that talk shift means?
Yeah, so, a lot of the tools that I use, I was fortunate to have built a tech company worth now hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm still a part owner in that company. We sold it this year, and admittedly that was actually a very complex business. One of my biggest challenges as CEO was actually reducing the complexity so we could grow faster. And ultimately what I found when I left that business and kind of tried to figure out, there were many things I was doing right as a leader, but there were also a lot of things that I was doing wrong. And a lot of them came down to really kind of very demanding communication, which certainly was one thing that contributed to our rapid growth. We went from, 10 or 15 employees to hundreds of employees over the course of the time that I was there. And but I also, the thing that contributed to my downfall was that same demanding communication. And so I was looking for simple communication tools that I call these talk shifts, but boiling it down to simple fill-in-the-blanks phrases and questions, basically where you can lift those fill-in-the-blanks phrases and fill in whatever words work in your situation to actually transform your communication with others, how you lead, the results that you get, and ultimately your relationships. And so that's really kind of taking a lot of these sometimes conceptual things, like, for example, something like emotional intelligence. I had read, back 1993 or whenever, when Daniel Goleman's first, big book about emotional intelligence came out. I'd read that book and many others, and I don't actually think that I was necessarily any more emotionally intelligent in my communication. I had an intellectual understanding of what emotional intelligence is, but I never had language to actually put it into action. And so part of, there are 3 or 4 chapters in the book. Some readers would say there's many more than 3 or 4 chapters that I'll get to, like how to have more emotional intelligence and more empathy in our communication with others. Ultimately, when the book hit the #1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list earlier this year, and I think that one of the reasons that we're hearing frequently from readers is that it's actually, there was someone who just posted on one of my Facebook ads just last week that people are buying the book and they're using it not only as like to read it through the first time, but many people are saying they're reading the book multiple times. Just in the first 6 or 8 weeks, reading it multiple times, because those refreshers of having these simple tools that you can refer back to say, oh, here's a challenge that I'm having where I'm angry with someone. What's a specific phrase that I could use that might change the outcome of that conversation where I or someone else is angry, for example.
Yeah. So this book is mainly more on the business aspect, or can we use that in our personal lives too?
It's really, it's equally so on both sides. So it really depends. We have people who are, CEOs who read the book. We have first-time managers, and we have 85-year-old grandmothers who've never worked a day in their lives, and all come to the book really with different, for different purposes. I would probably say many of the people who read it for maybe pick up the book for business purposes realize that they'll realize that it's actually equally powerful as a parent or in their marriage or relationships outside of work. So, and that was ultimately what we intended to write the book. It's a communication book. The subtitle is Tools to Transform Leadership in Business, in Relationships, and in Life. So we talk about leadership in the context of leading in a relationship. And that can be a professional relationship at work, if it's a team, or it can be a personal relationship at home in a family.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krister, for that. So let me step back a little bit before we get into the details of other items too. So you became a keynote speaker automatically? You became an author automatically, or was there something that you felt that there was a gap, and that's how you placed yourself in? How did you start this whole process?
I guess I started the whole process. I wanted to have an impact on people's. Write a book that would transform ultimately families and marriages, but using business as the vehicle to get there. My premise is, at least for people like myself, especially men, many successful, driven men are less likely to pick up a book about parenting or being a great husband, but we'd be more likely to pick up a book about being a great leader and being successful in our jobs. And so it really came about how do we give people who maybe wouldn't read a book about how to have better relationships personally, how do we give them the same tools in context that they are actually looking, right? So it's kind of like give them the tools that maybe they would find in other parts of the bookstore, but since it's actually a leadership book, and because these tools work equally well in a leadership context in business, then now we can transform companies, teams, and families kind of with one single blow, if you will.
That's very interesting. So very briefly, if you don't mind, can you give me an example for just like what you said about the marriage versus the business aspect? Do you have like one situation come up into your mind very briefly, not in detail, because then we'll read the book, obviously. Yeah. Give an example.
So the simplest example of a talk show, I'll give you a simple one, and then I'll give you a kind of a medium one, because the simplest one is, so if we want to have better conversations with people, just ask questions that begin with the word what or how. So one of the chapters is about the secret to listening is talking. So what if like our problem with listening was not our ears, but it was actually our mouth? What was it? What if it was what we're saying? If we're not listening to what people are saying, maybe we're not asking questions that we're dying to know the answer to. And so by simply taking a question and saying every question that I ask is going to start with the word what or how, then you will immediately transform the kinds of questions that you ask, and you'll get better answers or more in-depth answers. Because it's very hard to answer a question that starts with the word what or how with just kind of a one or two word answer. Usually they're much more open-ended questions. So that's kind of like the simplest example of one of the rules. Another one, like around emotional intelligence, for example, we talk a lot about anger, is to really understand like the emotion that we're experiencing behind our anger. So whenever we feel angry or we observe someone else who's feeling angry, and I use the words frustrated or disappointed as synonyms for anger, which I think many leaders and people in a work context would say that I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed more frequently than we would say we're angry. But So if I say, what is the emotion behind my frustration? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it hurt? Is it guilt? Is it shame? Is it embarrassment? And so we specifically ask that question to uncover what's really behind our anger. And what happens is when we ask ourselves that question, whenever we get angry, or we even, if you're angry with me and I observe that you're kind of behaving in kind of an aggressive way, I can say, I wonder what's behind his anger. I wonder if it's fear. And I can start to think of like, oh, you know what? I bet he's afraid. We had an example of one person I was coaching was having like a successful business executive having challenge with an ex-spouse. And the ex-spouse was just sending these just aggressive, nasty grams via text. And I said, well, what do you think is behind this person's anger? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it shame, embarrassment, hurt, sadness? And the executive said it's actually a little bit of all of the above. This person's afraid because they don't know how they're going to support themselves without the income that I pay them. They're more than a little bit guilty about how their behavior contributed to the demise in the relationship. They're ashamed of what they've done. And so now, rather than having this thought of this person who's like, oh, wow, that terrible person sent me a mean text message or email, I can actually kind of reframe like, wow, that person's really afraid and guilty and ashamed. And all other things equal, I'm a little bit less likely I can see that person's anger in more of a compassionate light. It doesn't necessarily make it okay to say these things or do these things that are hurtful, but I can kind of take and see that person rather than in bringing up my own anger. I can maybe channel more like pity or sympathy or compassion for that person, and rather than responding with anger and escalating that situation, then maybe I just walk away, or I just say, yeah, I'm sorry that you feel that way, or you seem hurt or afraid, or it inspires different ways of communicating.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Krister. Good examples, great examples, because you know what, people, they just need to understand, and I want them to understand that this book is a good tool to help on the family aspect and then business aspect, and how you can bring two together and as one tool, one big tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into much more deeper, if that's okay, let me ask you few words, because I know you like to play around with words. Okay. So if I give you certain words, what is your first word comes in your mind when I say that?
Okay.
Clear? Okay. Family.
Kids.
Business.
Leadership.
World.
World. The first word is kind of like, I don't even know the word, but like upside down.
Upside down. Okay, awesome. And leadership.
Compassion.
Team.
Work.
Okay. Culture.
Communication.
Career.
Action.
Success.
Overrated.
Overrated. Okay, that's several words there, but okay. And one last one. Krister.
Writer.
Writer. Awesome. Yeah, so because you like to play around with words, and I said, let me pick your brain on these words, because you know what?
Yeah.
Really interesting. You said business equals to leadership, and then leadership, you said something else. So it's kind of weird when you play around with words like that. So thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
So this book that we're talking about, I think it's called 22 Tools. Is that correct? 22 talk shifts. So why 22? Why not 24? Or why not 26? Is there certain steps that you have to go through in order to get that?
No, I think they're all interchangeable. There's not necessarily, some of them are used in multiple contexts, but just as simple as 22 talk shifts sounds a lot better than 23. But I mean, we're already working on a follow-up book we've been working on it for a while. I mean, there are many other tools. The framework is pretty simple, in that we generally just look at what we try to do is we try to look at problems kind of an interesting lens and kind of shift perspective on a specific topic. The current book is a little bit more practical, but the things we're working on for the follow-up book are more. You think you're hearing a story about X, and you realize that you're actually hearing a story about Y. Or we're playing around with different analogies that sometimes might be a little bit two things like, I never would have thought that those two are related.
Yeah, when I actually read the title 22 Talk Shifts, the first thing came to my mind is, oh, maybe he's playing with the words and it could be Catch 22.
Yeah.
Because that's how I looked at it. I don't know if that's right or wrong. So it's very...
No, that didn't have anything to necessarily do. It's just a matter of 22 felt right.
Yeah.
It was either going to be 20, 12, 10, or 22.
Okay.
Because we wanted to have good alliteration.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I will definitely purchase this book and start reading and try to understand from my point of view. Try to put my podcast and my business world and my family life and see how it kind of helps me in many ways. So thank you for having that tool to help people like us who needs a tool like that.
Well, we did something really unique, especially for people who want to practice the tools in a family context or entrepreneurs who, is we created a video book. So I mean, there's a traditional book you can get on Amazon, or you can get it at talkshift.com. Of course, we got an audio book, but a video book is, imagine it's unabridged. It's got all the same content that the actual book is, but it's actually a video. The talk shifts, for example, they appear on screen, so you've got the visual learning. I'm reading it directly to camera, so you can actually see. And because I'm looking directly in camera, and you can actually, unlike even an audiobook, you can actually feel how it feels to be spoken to in this way, right? Because I'm looking at the camera, and you can't help but subconsciously be like, oh, that's what others will feel like when I ask that question in that way, or when I speak to them that way. And so it's kind of a unique concept. And the reason we did that was for two reasons. One, if you want to transform communication or the culture within a family, we actually have the video book is great. You can actually pop it on your smart TV. You can actually watch it on television together, so that you and others experience the tools in real time together, and you know that everyone is on the same page. And then in a business context, if you ever read a book and you're like, I wish Krister would read chapter number 12, but he's probably not going to like chapters number 1 through 10, so he's never going to get to chapter 12. If you purchase the video book, you can share just an individual chapter, the video of that one chapter, with someone. And each of the chapters is kind of 8 to 10 minutes long max, so it's like a mini TED Talk. And you can actually say, hey, Krister, Bob, whatever, could we talk about this one tool, and maybe we could use that in our team. And maybe that person may choose to read the whole rest of the book or whatever, but you can kind of just use these tools individually as kind of a standalone tool. So,
yeah. Thank you again for that. And you gave us 2 examples from the book itself, and the how to help each other out on that. But one quick thing, if you don't mind, very quickly. We're not going to go in detail because that's going to be a long thing. But what are the 3 main questions, and what are the 3 main things that they ask you that I need help with?
The 3 main things that I think that I find that people come to the book in so many different directions. One is how to have more open and honest conversations. More courageous conversations. And that can be in the context of personal and professional life. We get a lot of people who actually, even entrepreneurs and business people who read the book and it was great from a business side, but I also keep using these things with my kids. So a lot of people tend to use them, even with young kids, as young as, I had a reader just told me that they taught their 8-year-old some of the talk shifts, how to use them, because they are really that simple. Some are a little bit more difficult, and you probably need to be, kind of an 18 or whatever to really kind of understand them fully. But many of them are as simple. Like one of the comments I get most frequently from people is, yeah, that couch at number 5, I use that with my kids at the dinner table, and I have totally different conversations than we used to. And so, that's kind of exciting. And then I think the other thing that people say is that most frequently, like, they say that their eyes were really open to kind of just a different way of looking at the world. Because a lot of the book does encourage us not to just speak to others in a new way, but a lot of it is about asking ourselves questions that maybe change our perspective on what's happening around us and what other people are saying to us.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between asking questions and asking the right questions. I think that's the key, and that's the tool. And I think you're right. I think from kids all the way down to adulthood, we still don't ask the right questions. So I think there are certain tools, and this is one of the tools that I think we should use. And I'm pretty sure there's other books out there. And we're not saying that go to this book only. We're just saying that use the right tool and use the right mentor, use whoever you want to get a professional help or something. Yeah. So thank you again, Krister, for that. So before you leave today, any last words to my audience and my viewers, or anything on Back to Basics before you leave?
I think it's ultimately, I think communication is, it's kind of ways. My mantra is, change your words and you can change your leadership, you can change your outcomes, you can change your life, you can change your team. It all comes down to just the words. And I think that, the first step is changing what our words are that we speak to others. And in technology, we always kind of call it garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the way I speak to you, basically your words that you speak back to me is very much a function of whatever I say to you.
That's right.
And so if I want to change that, I have a lot more control over what you say and how you speak to me than probably most people realize. Meaning my words will affect yours. So it's this kind of, it can be a virtuous cycle or it can be a destructive cycle that erodes, relationships and results over time, or increases and grows relationships and results over time. So I think that's really that's the essence of what this book and this movement is all about. The other thing I'll share is that, when I sold my company earlier this year, I made a commitment that all the profits from this book and all the coaching and everything that we do, 100% goes to fuel our cause of changing the words of the world. So I don't take any salary, I don't take any profits out of this. It's purely an effort to give back to society and people in general. And so if people were to purchase things from the talkshift.com website, just understand that all of that is going back to kind of fuel better lives for better people and better communication in the world.
Yeah, thank you again, Krister, for all the support that you have given me by coming here, being a guest on my show, and I'll definitely get your book, and we'll make some arrangements that I can ship it back to you, then you can sign it and send it back to me, because it will be great to have this tool in my so-called beginning of my bookshelves that I'm going to be having shortly, because this is the new studio that I have here, and I want to build it with all the efforts, with all the authors and all the people that I've had so far on my show. So thank you again for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Krister. So, thank you. Guys, we have spoken with Krister today, and we talked about the basics of, playing with words. That's what we did. We played with words. And I've given him how many words? Maybe 6, 7, 8 words, right? And he came out with different answers. So why don't we do this? Everyone, kids, adults, anybody, come up with some words and see what you come up with and see if that helps. Because you know what? Playing with words can change your life, your thought process, and depression and happiness. That's what it is. That's what he's trying to do. So guys, as usual, as always, there is a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and here's a quote of the day. The quote of the day is, when the world says, give up, hope whispers, try it one more time. Well, try it one more time. I think that's what he said. Play with the words. I think that's what I try to do. Well, that's what I think I did. So guys, as usual, as always, what do I always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and keep on commenting as much as you can. Good, bad, ugly, either way, it'll make my show stronger. And there's three main things that it makes this show successful in my eyes: the guest, the content, and the third one obviously is the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Put in the right kind of action that we need to reach the results that we always strive for. And that's just the way I run, and it's the way I have improved my life from a point where I thought that I didn't really even I didn't even deserve to do it. So if I can do it, any single person in this world can do it.
Yeah, thank you again for being who you are, and the stuff that you do, and the greatest self empowerment that you did. You and I would not have met. So, and I'm glad that you did that, and all power to you, whatever you're doing. So, thank you again, Yash, for being on the show and supporting me in the small journey that I have on my podcast. And thank you again for coming on season 2. So, thank you again.
Thank you very, very, very much.